I returned from a 3-week business trip to find a new occupant in my CEO's suite. It was my wife's best friend, Julian Vance. "Marcus, don't be so petty, my wife," Ava said, her voice dripping with unearned authority. Julian's health has been fragile lately, and the energy in his old office was just draining. He needed a space that inspired him. Julian sat behind my mahogany desk, offering me a smug, Victor's grin. He pointedly adjusted his sleeve, flashing the $1 million Patek Philippe I had originally bought as an anniversary gift for Ava. "Don't blame Ava, Mr. Thorne," Julian said, his voice a mock sympathetic drawl. "It's my fault for being so sensitive." Ava immediately stepped in front of him, shielding him as if I were a physical threat. She glared at me, her eyes cold. "It has nothing to do with him. You're a cold-blooded machine, Marcus. I gave him this office so you could hopefully absorb some of his empathy and humanity to help you atone for your ego. Do you really have a nerve to complain?" I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply pulled out my phone and tapped a video file. On the high-definition screen, the two of them were entwined in my own bed, their voices crystal clear through the hidden security feed. "Baby, once the stress finally breaks him," Julian's voice whispered on the recording, "the whole company belongs to us." I closed the video and watched the color drain from their faces, their features twisting into masks of horror. "You can keep the office," I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. "Consider it your honeymoon suite. Though, I imagine the square footage in a federal cell will be a bit more cramped." In an instant, my marriage didn't just end. It imploded into a wasteland of ash. The video stopped, leaving the office in a tomb-like silence, save for the low hum of the HVAC system. Julian's triumphant smirk was frozen, his face the color of parchment. The luxury watch on his wrist suddenly looked like a branded iron, marking his guilt. Ava's pupils dilated. She let out a sharp, ragged gasp that tore through the silence. She lunged at me, clawing for my phone, her designer nails inches from the screen. I stepped aside with practiced ease, and she stumbled, nearly hitting the floor. "Marcus, you spied on me? You pathetic, disgusting." She screamed, her voice cracking. It was the sound of hysterical rage, devoid of any real ground to stand on. Julian's knees buckled. He sank to the plush carpet, his soft, pampered frame trembling. "Marcus, please. She seduced me. It was her. She told me you didn't love her, that she was so lonely, so neglected." He was babbling now, tears and snot trailing down his face. Ava froze, her eyes snapping toward Julian with the venomous hatred of a cornered viper. You coward," she hissed, her body shaking. "Say that again." She pointed a trembling finger at him, but Julian just curled into a ball, avoiding her gaze. "It was you. It was always you," he whimpered. The two of them turned on each other in an instant, snarling and casting blame like trapped animals. It was a pathetic, low-rent comedy. I watched the spectacle with a detachment so profound it surprised even me. There wasn't a spark of pain left, only a cold, bracing clarity. I picked up the desk phone and dialed the internal line. "Security, I need 2 officers in the CEO suite immediately. Also, get Nora to call our lead counsel, Mr. Sterling. Tell him to meet me in my office now." My voice was flat, a dial tone of a human being. Hearing the word security, Ava's entire demeanor shifted. She dropped to her knees and grabbed the hem of my trousers, her fingers ice cold. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I was confused. I was in a dark place. It's you I love. Only you," she wailed, tears smearing her expensive makeup. That face, which I once thought was the most beautiful thing in the world, now looked grotesque. My stomach churned. I felt a wave of pure physical revulsion. I began prying her fingers off my leg one by one. The touch of her skin made my flesh crawl. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice a low, frozen rasp. "You're making me sick." The security team arrived seconds later, their heavy boots thudding against the floor. They took in the chaos with professional silence. Mr. Sterling, my attorney, pushed through the door, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of Ava huddled on the floor. I pointed at Julian, who was sobbing into the carpet, and Ava, who was paralyzed at my feet. "I'm pressing charges for corporate espionage, embezzlement, and grand larceny," I said firmly. "Escort them out." "Mr. Sterling, let's file the police report." Julian went rigid. Ava looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of begging and absolute despair. "Marcus, are you really going to destroy me? I'm your wife." She tried to use the title like a shield, a final desperate gambit. I laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. My wife? My wife was in my bed plotting with her lover to kill me and seize my assets. You lost that title a long time ago. The guards moved in, expertly hoisting them up. Julian struggled feebly, crying out for another chance. Ava was dragged toward the door, her hair disheveled, screaming threats that echoed down the hallway. "You'll regret this, Marcus. I'll make sure you regret this." The entire floor of employees watched in stunned silence as the two were hauled away. I ignored their stares. I leaned in and whispered to the lead security officer, "Freeze every authorized user card attached to her name. Everything." The officer nodded and turned to follow. My world needed a deep, surgical cleaning, and I was just getting started. The office returned to its deathly quiet. A fresh cup of coffee was placed on my desk. Nora, my assistant, had brought it in without a word. "The police have been notified, Mr. Thorne. Here is the filing receipt," she said, her tone perfectly professional. I took the paper, my thumb tracing the edge of the official seal. Good. By noon, a fresh storm hit the lobby. Ava's parents, the Rivers, burst into my office like a pair of hurricanes. Their faces were flushed with indignation. Ava's mother pointed a finger at my chest, screaming, "Marcus Thorne, you ungrateful snake. After everything our Ava did for you, how dare you humiliate her like this?" Her father stood beside her, his eyes narrowed with spite. "You think you're untouchable? The Rivers family has deep roots in this city, boy. We aren't going down without a fight." I didn't even stand up. I simply nodded to Nora, who pressed play on an audio recording. I watched Ava's mother's face as the sound filled the room. It was a recorded call between Ava and her parents. The greed in their voices was palpable. "Mom, Marcus bought me another bag, but it was only 10 grand. He's becoming so stingy," Ava's voice complained. "Be patient, honey," her mother's voice replied, honey sweet and manipulative. "Just keep playing the devoted wife. He's obsessed with you. Soon enough, he'll put the whole company in your name. Then we can finally get your brother that condo in the Gold Coast and give him the seed money for his firm." "Exactly," her father's voice added. "Your brother is the future of this family's legacy. We're counting on you." The recording clicked off. The Rivers went pale, their bravado evaporating into the stale office air. Their lips trembled, but no words came out. I tapped a pen against the desk. "Riverside Holdings, your family firm? As of 10 minutes ago, every contract you had with my subsidiaries has been terminated for cause." Ava's mother gasped, her eyes darting around in terror. "Oh, I forgot to mention," I added, my voice devoid of emotion. "Riverside Holdings was technically a wholly owned subsidiary of mine after I bought out your debt last quarter. I own you." They both swayed, looking as though the bones had been removed from their bodies. Her mother tried to speak, but her voice was a ghost. "Get out of my building," I said, my voice turning cold as a winter grave. "Or I'll have you charged with trespassing and harassment." They practically fell over each other as they scrambled out of the office, their exit a blur of desperation and shame. I immediately contacted the PR department. Within the hour, a press release hit the wires. It stated that Julian Vance had used an illicit relationship with a company officer to attempt the theft of trade secrets for Novatech and was currently in custody. The local social circles and the tech industry exploded. The critics who had once praised Julian's artistic vision turned on him overnight. Every partner, every sponsor scrambled to distance themselves from the wreckage. Julian Vance was socially and professionally dead. In lockup, Ava learned of her family's ruin through her court-appointed lawyer. Riverside Holdings was gone, and Julian was a pariah. I heard she spent the night screaming at the walls of her cell. I sat in my office, watching the Chicago skyline. The city lights were brilliant, a sharp contrast to the cold stillness in my chest. The wound of the betrayal didn't throb anymore. It had been replaced by a sharp, icy satisfaction. The taste of this justice was unlike anything I had ever felt. I set my coffee cup down. The game was only beginning. "Mr. Sterling looked grave as he set a folder on my desk. "Marcus, the verbal mention of killing you in that video. It's hard to prove as a literal conspiracy to commit murder in court. They'll likely get a few months for harassment or attempted extortion, but the sentence won't be long." I let out a soft, dry laugh and pulled a thumb drive from my drawer. It was cold to the touch, a small, silver weapon. "That was just the appetizer, Sterling. This is the main course." The lawyer took the drive and plugged it into his laptop. His screen filled with thousands of files. It was a complete digital trail of Julian using Ava's credentials to steal core proprietary data that I had accidentally left accessible to her. Timestamps, IP addresses, file manifests, it was all there. Then came the bank records. Julian, using Ava's forged signature, had legally moved several large sums from the corporate account into a series of shell companies. Money that eventually ended up in his personal accounts. Nora, standing nearby, stared at the screen in disbelief. Marcus, when did you? My mind drifted back 6 months. I remember the night I saw Ava secretly going through my briefcase. The hunger in her eyes, the way she held her breath, it had sent a chill through me. The seed of suspicion had been planted then. I hadn't made a scene. I hadn't confronted her. I had simply begun to build a cage. Like a patient hunter, I wove a net. I had pretended to work late in front of her, sighing about technical bottlenecks and financial crises. I let her believe Novatech was on the verge of collapse, that I was failing. I forged a set of core codes filled with backdoors and honeypots. I created a set of books that looked like a gold mine, but were actually a legal minefield. I led them along, one breadcrumb at a time, until they were convinced the prize was within their grasp. The watch was part of it, too. I added, my gaze steady. Nora's eyes lit up with realization. I knew she'd give it to him. I explained, my voice chillingly detached. It's the most visible piece of evidence, a physical tie to the stolen funds. It was the first gift I ever gave them. Mr. Sterling stared at the screen, his face flushing with excitement. He rubbed his hands together. Marcus, this isn't a misdemeanor anymore. This is a goddamn slaughter. His voice shook with professional glee. Economic espionage, embezzlement, money laundering, wire fraud. He ticked off the charges, his voice rising. With all this, they won't see the sun for 10 to 15 years. He slammed the laptop shut, looking invigorated. I looked out the window. The city was glowing, but I felt none of its warmth. I was the one holding the strings. The shortcut they thought they had found was a dead end I had designed for them. The next step would be the trial, where their masks would be ripped away for good. The courtroom was a cathedral of cold marble and high ceilings. I sat at the plaintiff's table, directly across from Ava and Julian. They wore orange jumpsuits, their skin sallow, their frames withered. Ava's eyes were fixed on me, filled with a desperate, silent pleading for mercy. I never looked back. My focus remained solely on the judge and the evidence. The prosecution began laying out the case. When they presented the chat logs of Julian offering to sell our core code to our biggest competitor, he finally broke. He began to shake violently, his lips turning white. His lawyer tried to argue that he was merely a puppet, manipulated by Ava's mastermind schemes. Julian caught the cue immediately, sobbing about his innocence. I just loved her too much. It was all her idea. She wanted to drain the company dry, he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Ava. Ava stared at the man who had whispered sweet nothings in her ear, watching him throw her into the fire without a second thought. She let out a piercing, shattered scream. You coward! You lying piece of filth! Her voice was a wail of pure agony. The bailiffs moved in to restrain her. My legal team then dropped the final hammer, a recording of Julian bragging to a friend at a bar. Ava, that woman is just a walking ATM with no brains. Julian's recorded voice echoed through the courtroom, dripping with contempt. Once I have the keys to the kingdom, I'm kicking her to the curb. The gallery erupted. The jury looked disgusted. Ava's body went limp, as if her spine had been removed. She collapsed in her seat, her eyes vacant. Her last illusion had been pulverized. The verdict was swift. Julian Vance, 15 years for industrial espionage, embezzlement, and money laundering. Ava Thorne, 7 years as a primary accomplice. The gavel fell with a final, echoing thud. I stood up and smoothed my suit. My movements were slow, deliberate. I locked eyes with Ava for 1 second. There was no hate in my gaze, no pity, just a total, chilling indifference. Then I turned and walked out of the courtroom. My world was finally clean. The weight that lifted off my shoulders felt like gravity itself had changed. The divorce was a formality. Ava's lawyers tried to fight for a settlement, but we produced a forensic audit showing that her actions had cost the company millions. The court ruled that she had forfeited her right to any marital assets and ordered her to pay restitution. Her net worth was officially zero. The day after the sentencing, the Rivers showed up at my estate. They knelt at the iron gates, sobbing. Marcus, please have mercy. We were wrong. Her mother wailed, her voice hoarse. Ava has suffered enough. Don't destroy our family's name, her father cried, his forehead bruised from leaning against the bars. I didn't meet them. I sent Nora out with a single document, an equity purchase agreement. It stated that I would buy their debt-ridden firm for exactly $1. They saw the paper as a lifeline, a way to escape the creditors. They signed their names with shaking hands, thinking it was an act of mercy. The next morning, I called a press conference in front of their former headquarters. I stood before the cameras, with the Rivers watching from the sidelines. I, Marcus Thorne, officially announced today, my voice was loud and clear, that the Rivers Group is dissolved. We are beginning immediate bankruptcy liquidation. Ava's father's face went white. He pointed at me, his mouth moving but no sound coming out. Her mother let out a shrill, guttural scream. Marcus, you monster. You'll burn for this. The father clutched his chest and collapsed. An ambulance arrived shortly after to take him away. The mother remained on the sidewalk, cursing my name until she was hoarse. I looked down at her, my eyes cold. This is exactly what your family owes me. I went back to my empty mansion. I hired a crew to remove every single thing that belonged to Ava, the clothes, the jewelry, even our wedding photos. They were tossed into industrial trash bags and hauled away. Looking at the bare walls and the clean, silent rooms, I didn't feel sad. I felt like I had finally finished a long, dirty chore. My past was bleached white. A year later, I got a call from the correctional facility. Ava had requested a visit multiple times. Out of a sense of finality, I agreed. In the visiting room, behind thick glass, I saw her again. She was wearing a baggy jumpsuit, her face gaunt and unrecognizable. She had bruises on her cheek, and her eyes were sunken. When she saw me, she burst into tears. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up, she sobbed. It's so hard in here. People are mean. They hurt me. Please help me. Just give me a better placement, please. I listened in silence. Her tears, her suffering, it felt like watching a movie in a language I didn't speak. Where is the heart of the ocean? I asked suddenly. It was the first expensive necklace I had ever bought her. Ava blinked. Her hand instinctively go to her bare neck. I put in storage. I smiled, a cold, mocking thing. I turned my phone toward the glass. It showed a photo of Julian Vance, taken 18 months ago, sitting in a brand new red Ferrari, grinning. You sold the necklace to buy him that car, didn't you? I looked her in the eye. My private investigators had found the truth long ago. Her true love had been a transaction from the start. She had pawned her history for a man who viewed her as a paycheck. The color left Ava's face. She stared at the photo, her eyes shattering. Her repentance was revealed as the hollow lie it always was. I stood up. Have a productive sentence. Don't contact me again. That was the last time I saw her. I walked out into the sun, leaving the ghost of my past behind. 3 years passed. Novatech went public, its valuation skyrocketing. I became a titan of industry, a legend in the business world. Nora was now my COO. Our relationship had evolved into something deeper, a bond forged in the fires of professional combat and mutual trust. On the way to a charity gala, my car stopped at a red light. I happened to glance out the window toward a row of trash bins. 2 homeless people were fighting over scrap of something. One of them was a woman with matted, yellowish hair and rags for clothes. She was pushed to the ground by a man, but she clutched a plastic bottle to her chest like it was gold. I recognized her. It was Ava, out on early parole. She was bleeding from a scrape on her forehead, fighting for a nickel deposit. Her eyes were wide with a pathetic, animalistic desperation. My driver whispered, Mr. Thorne, should I drive? I said. The light turned green. As the car pulled away, I saw her in the rearview mirror. She had won the bottle and was tucking it into her shirt with a grin of pure, miserable satisfaction. It was a haunting, pitiful sight. I looked away and never looked back. Her life was no longer my concern. The pain she had caused me was now reflected back on her in the most absolute way. The distance between us was now infinite. That was the only revenge that mattered. My world was the stars and the sea. Hers was the gutter. One evening, as Nora was leaving the office, she realized she was being followed. Her instincts, sharpened by years at my side, kicked in immediately. She didn't panic. She called me from her car. Marcus, I think someone is tailing me. Her voice was steady. I immediately mobilized our private security and looped in the police. My gut told me this wasn't random. It smelled like the past. The police investigation was swift. The mastermind was Julian Vance, pulling strings from behind bars. He had heard about the Novatech IPO and had finally snapped. He blamed me for his downfall, screaming to anyone who would listen that he was going to take me down with him. He had used a fellow inmate to contact some low-level thugs to kidnap Nora, hoping to ransom her for $1 billion. I laughed when I heard the plan. He was still so incredibly stupid. I decided to play along. With the cooperation of the FBI, we staged a successful kidnapping. Nora, ever the professional, played her part perfectly. Julian called from a smuggled phone in prison, his voice a raspy, demonic snarl. Thorne, you think you won? I'm going to make sure you never sleep again, he roared. 10 billion in crypto, where your woman comes back in pieces. The entire call was recorded and traced. It was the final nail in his coffin. He was handed an additional 10 years for conspiracy to kidnap and extortion. He would likely spend the rest of his life in a cage. His final move had been like a moth flying into a blowtorch. I hung up the phone, my expression flat. The last piece of filth had been swept away. The media began to obsess over my partnership with Nora. They called her the goddess of Novatech and spoke of us as the ultimate power couple. Ava, wandering the streets, saw the news on a discarded newspaper in a subway station. That headline was the final break in her mind. Late one night, a hysterical screaming erupted outside the gates of my estate. Security intercepted a disheveled woman trying to climb the fence. She was filthy, her clothes torn, her mind clearly gone. "Marcus, come out. I know you still love me," she shrieked. "You can't be with her. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just take me back. Let's start over." I was on a video call with Nora, finalizing our strategy for the next quarter. When a security lead called my desk, I didn't even look at the monitor. "Handle it according to protocol. If she returns, call the police." I closed the security feed and went back to my meeting. The woman outside was nothing more than a buzzing insect. Her love and her regret were worth less than the static on a dead radio. Later, I heard she was taken to a state psychiatric facility. Her story had reached its inevitable conclusion. One weekend, Nora was helping me organize my library. She pulled an old, dusty leather book from a crate in the corner. It was my college journal. She flipped it open and saw my youthful, idealistic handwriting. "Saw Ava today. She wore a white dress. She looked like an angel. I'm going to build an empire for her. I'm going to give her everything so she never has to worry again." Nora looked up at me, her eyes soft with a complex emotion. She had never known that version of me. "Marcus, you really..." She trailed off. I walked over and took the journal from her. I looked at the words. They felt like they had been written by a stranger in a different century. I smiled, and for the first time, it was a smile of true release. "People change," I said softly. "The man who wrote that died the day I decided to fight back." I walked to the fireplace and tossed the journal into the flames. The fire licked the pages, turning the youthful dreams and the desperate love into gray ash. It wasn't a denial of the past. It was a confirmation that it was truly over. It held no power over me anymore. I turned to Nora. "Come on, let's go look at the site for the new headquarters." I didn't look back at the fire. Years passed, and the Thor name became a synonym for the American dream. Novatech's reach was global. I sat for an interview with a top business magazine. Nora was by my side. We were partners in every sense of the word. The interviewer, a seasoned journalist, leaned in with a careful question. "Mr. Thorne, your life is legendary, but it's had its turbulence." She chose her words carefully. "Looking back, do you feel any lingering resentment? Any hate for those who betrayed you?" The camera zoomed in on my face. The world wanted to see a flicker of pain or a spark of anger. I looked into the lens and smiled. My eyes were clear, untroubled. "My goal has always been the stars," I said, my voice resonant and calm. "When you're running a marathon toward the horizon, you occasionally trip over a rock." I paused. "Do you hate the rock?" "No. You kick it out of the path and keep running." "In fact," I added, "you usually forget what the rock even looked like pretty quickly." My answer was the ultimate testament to my strength. I hadn't just defeated them. I had erased them. Across the city, in a quiet ward of the state hospital, Ava sat staring at a television screen. She saw the man I had become, radiant, untouchable, and utterly at peace. She looked down at her own hands, her nails caked with dirt. When those words, "forget what the rock even looked like," hit her, she let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a wail of total, final erasure. She had become a non-entity in the only world she ever cared about. Night fell. Nora and I stood on the observation deck of the new Novatech Tower. The city lights below looked like a carpet of fallen stars. "What are you thinking about?" Nora asked, draping a coat over my shoulders. I pointed up at the constellations. "I'm thinking about our Star Reach project. I want to know when we can put the first satellite in orbit." We shared a smile, a silent understanding. This was the life I had built from the ruins. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Inmate Julian Vance deceased following prison altercation. I glanced at it for a split second and swiped it away, the same way one clears a spam text. The screen went dark, and my heart didn't skip a single beat. I didn't tell Nora. There was no need. The end of a traitor, whether by rot or by violence, couldn't touch me. My revenge hadn't happened in a courtroom or a prison. It had happened the moment I decided they no longer mattered. I took Nora's hand, feeling the warmth of her palm. It was a warmth built on loyalty and a shared future. "The wind is picking up," I said softly. "Let's go home." My home was a place of peace. My journey to the stars was just beginning. Story complete.